God's purpose in creation was to bestow of his good to another. God alone is true perfection, free of all deficiency, and there is no perfection comparable to God. Any imaginable perfection, with the exception of God's, is therefore not true perfection. Other things may be said to have perfection, but it is only relative to something less perfect. Absolute perfection, however, is only that of God. Since God desired to bestow good, a partial good would not be sufficient. The good that he bestows would have to be the ultimate good that his handiwork could accept. God alone, however, is the only true good, and therefore his beneficent desire would not be satisfied unless it could bestow that very good, namely the true perfect good that exists in his intrinsic essence. This is also true in another way. True good exists only in God. His wisdom therefore decreed that the nature of this true benefaction be his giving created things the opportunity to attach themselves to him to the greatest degree possible for them. Therefore, even though created things cannot emulate God's perfection in their own right, the fact that they can be attached to him allows them to partake of it, since they can be considered part of God's perfection as a result of their association with him. They can thus derive pleasure from that true good to the greatest degree possible for them. The purpose of all that was created was therefore to bring into existence a creature who could derive pleasure from God's own good in a way that would be possible for it. God's wisdom, however, decreed that for such good to be perfect, the one enjoying it must be its master. He must be one who has earned it for himself, and not one given it accidentally or by chance. One sees that this arrangement is partially reminiscent of the perfection of God himself, at least to the degree that this is possible, for God's perfection is not a matter of chance either. God, however, is the one true perfection, being imperatively perfect, necessarily devoid of fault. This trait, in truth, is only God's, for no other being is perfect by necessity and devoid of fault by nature. Still, in order for a created being to come to resemble God to some degree, it is necessary that it at least earn the perfection that is not an imperative part of its being, and that it must avoid the deficiency that is not precluded by its nature. God therefore decreed and arranged that creation contain elements of both perfection and deficiency, as well as a creature with equal access to both. This creature would then be given the means to both acquire perfection and avoid deficiency. By clinging to the elements of perfection, this unique creature would make itself resemble its Creator, at least to the degree that this is possible for it. As a consequence, it becomes worthy of being drawn close to God, to derive pleasure from his goodness. By means of acquiring perfection, this creature becomes fit to cleave to its creator, simply because through acquiring perfection, it has in a certain aspect begun to, quote, resemble its creator. Moreover, by incorporating elements of perfection into itself, it, quote, cleaves to the creator's perfection and is drawn to him continually, until ultimately its earning of perfection and its bonding in closeness to him are one matter. This is so because God himself is the only true perfection, and all perfection must therefore be associated with him, as a branch is attached to its root. Therefore, even though the root of perfection cannot be attained, all true perfection is ultimately derived and transmitted from this root. If we understand that God alone is the true perfection, it follows that in nature and in creations, every fault is merely the absence of his good and the concealment of his presence. That is, closeness to God and illumination of his presence is the root and cause of every perfection that exists, while concealment of his presence is the root and cause of every fault, the degree of deficiency depending on the degree of this concealment. There is a unique creature which stands balanced between the elements of perfection and the elements of deficiency, which in turn are the result of God's illumination or concealment. When this creature strengthens himself striving for elements of perfection, incorporating them into his being, this in a way is a means of, quote, clinging to God, Baruch Shemo, as he is their root and source. The more elements of perfection this creature incorporates into itself, the stronger will be his association and bond to God. He becomes, so to speak, attached to God himself, deriving both pleasure and perfection from his goodness, while he is himself the master of this good and perfection, having acquired them by choosing them. Now, being that the creation in general must contain these different elements, elements of perfection and elements of deficiency as mentioned, and it must contain a creature who has the potential and ability for both to acquire perfection and avoid deficiency. Being given the means to acquire perfection, it follows without question that the world in general must contain great multitudes of different elements of each type in varying relationships to one another, so that the purpose for the world be realized. The creature destined for this great condition, namely a bond of, quote, closeness to him, is considered the main element of all creation. All else in existence is only an aid in some aspect or regard toward this goal, to have it succeed and become reality. They are therefore all considered secondary to this primary creature. This primary essential creature is a human being. All other created things, whether above or below humans, only exist for the sake of God, to complete his environment through their various different qualities appropriate for each of them. The elements of perfection which humans must strive to perfect in themselves are intellect and positive character traits. On the other hand, for the sake of acquiring perfection, the elements of deficiency that humans must avoid are the material and mundane matters of the world and negative character traits.